Hey, fucker. Hey, we're back. Bitch, we ain't done yet. We gotta talk about boundaries. There's no love without boundaries, and we want to watch out for codependency Trojan horses in our PTSD recovery. So, last time, and recently in our Mervyn Along episode, we talked about the necessity for compassion, forgiveness, multiple chances, getting off ourselves and others' backs. Redo 2025. And all of that is true. And all of that is part of the story. Because, and also, I think most of us have experienced over forgiveness or over compassion before, perhaps even in both directions. We've offered grace and care and redos to others in the past, maybe bountifully. We've seen how we were all the same and tried to give them the care that we wish we'd had. And they've taken advantage and they've manipulated us. And we've had to eat dirt in the aftermath. And if you're like me, you also might look back at early relationships and go, why did people let me get away with that? Didn't help me in the long run, though I see that they pitied me enough to let it pass in the short term. So, in all this highfalutin talk of care and mutuality and grace, sure. And also, we don't want to mistake martyrdom, people pleasing, self sabotage, codependency, enmeshment, or allowing abuse as any of these things. As much as we need compassion to see ourselves and others realistically as similar beings, we do also need something we've been talking about quite a bit recently: egos. And to have healthy egos, we need boundaries. Remember, what's an ego? The distinction between self and other, the perceived distance between you and them, the unique nature of being a self among other selves, which we do require because those things reflect an honest reality. As meat beings, we are separate from each other in a way, in the meat. And also, we are the same in a way, in the everything else. So we need an ego to exist because we exist in matter as matter, which is separate. On the day that we cease to materially be here with unique perspectives and needs connected to the bodies that imprison us, I'm just kidding. I do prefer to think of them as organic robot suits. Then, on that day, we can let go of that ego. Until the moment that we ditch our protein and fat and calcium deposits and our consciousness or soul or being flows back to wherever it came. You do need to know what's yours and what stank is drifting off of other beings. You do need to separate self from other because it is hard enough to manage being a single person who contains multitudes, let alone trying to manage someone else's multitudinal existence from the sidelines, from the satellite location of not them, not there inside the crowd. This is the function of the ego: to keep our shit, and their shit, their shit. For all the gruff talking it gets, a flexible and accurately sized one is crucial for sanity and success. And how do we know that we're flexibly separate, properly egoed in practice? By having flexible, adaptable barriers between us and them. Boundaries. When we have unhealthy egos, we have rigid, inflexible, unadaptive rules between us and them. Not the same thing. Relationship enders, not relationship allowers. So let's talk about the boundaries that we need to have real love in our lives and to be functional, actually, on just about any level. We need boundaries with others. We need boundaries within ourselves. And let's talk about how to do it, why it matters, how it relates to being able to experience love, and what boundaries are not. Ineffective, scapegoating, disempowering, and generally self sabotaging to the beholder. Rules. Okay, onward. Boundaries with others. Here's a fact about me. If we live in the same household, I'm 10,000 times more likely to think that I hate you. To be incapable of tapping into those soft, warm, expansive love feelings that we've spoken of. Instead, to be hard, judgmental, impatient, resentful, even punitive as soon as we are apart. I will miss you. I will suddenly have those fuzzy feelings. I will confusingly want to be back in your presence or in connection after wanting to smash your face into the ground. Don't worry, that warmth will disappear the second that we remake proximal contact. Why? Let's say poor boundaries in the home, especially. Thanks to growing up with no boundaries in the home in my childhood, their problems immediately became my problems. I wasn't really allowed to have problems, so I can't say that it flowed the other direction. But I was goaded into expressing the emotions and unmet needs of the clan so that they could pretend those were my problems, when, in fact, they were evidence of, as I've said, absolutely zero acknowledgement of being separate, autonomous individuals. Projection and projective identification raised me. And then my early adult relationships followed suit with friends, roommates, and live in partners. So now, in adult living, when I'm in residence with another, I feel like I can't get away from them or really their feelings to the extent that we are one and the same. Their shit is my shit. I can't close the valve to keep it from flowing down fast enough. Soon I'm absolutely drowning. Over time, with equity and exhaustion in mind, my shit then bubbles onto the street and becomes theirs. We become one conglomerate of each other's sorrows and annoyances and shortcomings and insecurities. All the hardest parts of life become the group identity and experience, and there is no individual one to balance that out. And under those circumstances, which always end up feeling like surviving, either because that's the way we wound up together in the first place, or because my life is a work camp, or because our living arrangement becomes so imbued with chaos and relational disorder that it feels incredibly insecure. Sure, anxiety runs high, sense of interdependence, need, perhaps. But love becomes impossible to tap into because there's no boundaries, because it becomes suffocating and overwhelming trying to manage the lives of two people when we all know it is nearly impossible to healthily manage even one. Because, as we kept saying in the series, we lose the target for our love to flow to. Where can we send it when we don't see them as a separate person? So inherently, we don't see us as a separate person without the contrast. So we can't issue real care or compassion to either party because what party? Life then becomes an inexplicable, uncontrollable, somewhat imperceivable cloud of feelings, reactions, instincts, and conditioned responses that cannot be ironed out when the source is identifiable. Self has been lost, which then cannot issue or receive care. So, how do we do boundaries in a way that reflects a healthy ego, a realistic understanding of the distinction and connections between self and other, to allow healthy relationship, to allow rethinking boundaries? Well, I like to think of the above example that I just gave, dragging myself. The problem of existing in one house with many beings. Boundaries are for creating room for everyone to exist under one roof. That's your relationship. That way, they can maintain relationship to themselves, first of all, and then relate outward to others from that center point. Secondly, in other words, everyone can clean their own room, make it tidy, prepare it for the day, make it highly effective and functional for everyone to be best served by it and by them having existed in that highly effective and functional room. And then boundaries allow each person to enter the shared space of the two-party relationship separately when they're prepared, where each individual's distinct abode isn't full of rot or rodents, mold, or other wreckage that's seeping out into the communal area, tainting the experience. Does that fit the metaphor? Boundary is creation of space for a person to exist healthily with themselves and then in relationship to others, and to maintain that space long term. Creation of a self guideline that produces and sustains that room is necessary. Okay, let me make that more clear. The important parts are: number one, identifying what isn't working for your psyche. Number two, taking time and space to figure out how you can protect yourself or give yourself the tools that you need to deal with the psychic upset and be okay. Number three, implementing the boundary yourself through behavioral modification. You do the thing you need to do. And that's it. The awareness that something has gone wrong. Plan to handle it better within one's own locus of control. Then behavioral follow through. And it does require at least responsible, respectful communication. The behavioral follow through is communication. We do also need to state to our relationship partners what we're doing and why. And that is how we bound for real, not just bitch at each other. You'll notice a step is not arguing about the stated boundary while refusing to take action personally, because boundaries aren't rules for others to abide by. If anything, they're rules for us to abide by for the sake of ourselves. And that is where humans tend to get things all fucked and turn the concept of boundaries into the reality of control attempts that reflect narcissism. What's a common experience with narcs? My way or the highway relational behaviors, which are actually my way or the I will bitch at you and punish you forever if you don't do what I want relational behaviors. Those are not boundaries, those are ultimatums and rules. Instead of saying, you'd better do this or else, if we could establish guidelines that allow us to continue to love someone, which encourages self love, even when they're being annoying, I think we can agree that's really the goal. The long term plan to let love into our lives and the indication of actual care for that person rather than needing to control who we hope they can be to support us. Right? Yeah. It's boundaries which enable those things. What's the shorthand to know the difference between rules and boundaries? Just to make sure this is explicitly stated, rules are about other people, what they must do. In school, we were told by the teachers that we couldn't scream in the middle of class. If we did, we were punished or kicked out of the building. Relationship over based on our conduct. Rules, right? Boundaries are about ourselves, self responsibility, taking action that allows us to manage our shit. In school, the teacher didn't leave the room if the kids screamed and return when they were all in a better psychic state. If they did, that would have been a boundary, a flexible, adaptable way that allows both parties to get what they need. Also, it would be wildly irresponsible in this example, but you see what I'm saying. Rule: you aren't allowed to eat meat in front of me because I'm vegan. Good luck with that. Boundary: I leave the area when people are eating animal products because it upsets me. Hey, look, life is in your control, and you can still have relationships with meat eaters if you don't disband the associations or try to define what they are allowed to do, right? Love is very possible, even in imperfect relationships with imperfect people. Very, very challenging people. If boundaries are also possible. And love for other is interconnected with love for self. Yeah, you got it. You're there. One enables the other in a bi-directional and ever-flowing fashion. So similarly, it's probably no surprise based on what I've already told you that we also need boundaries with self. I'm sure you've pieced this together and we don't really need to talk about it, but here we go. If boundaries are actually about what we need to do to keep ourselves acting in line with ourselves, so that we can then relate wholly outward with others, then we also need boundaries within ourselves to make sure we do the things we need to do with others. Yes, so simple. What I'm saying is, if we say, I will remove myself when people are chomping chickens around me, but then lack the internal boundaries to manage our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to do the removing, then the boundary with others does not matter. Without inner boundaries, we'll probably end up having a big inner reaction to the stimulation, but fail to take action to deal with those sensations, resulting in making a real ass out of oneself and perhaps even proclaiming some hard-nosed rules, which probably backfire in the relationship and love department, not to mention being absolutely ineffectual. And we can also say, if we lack the internal boundary that tells us, I don't talk down to myself when I notice this feeling or this keyword, I remove myself from the cognitive vicinity, then we're pretty likely to end up back in ruminatory holes of self destruction that erase all of this self love effort. Back at step one, not step one, back to obstacles between you and love. So, assuming we don't want to go back to self compassion start, how do we create inner boundaries with us? That above statement is generally how we create internal boundaries with us. I don't talk down to myself. When I notice this feeling or this keyword, I remove myself from the cognitive vicinity, or I change my conscious thought. So that means you just need to, number one, evidentially determine what feeling, thought, self talk, degree of repetition, or rumination does not produce positive results for a fucker in their life. That's you. When your mind starts wandering this anxious and obsessive direction, when you have this pained, outraged feeling in your gut, when you hear your mind use the same phrases as your past abuser, when you've thought about it for 23 days straight already, what happens? A lot of energy is wasted. You explode at people you care about. You land yourself straight in a stinkhole and can't crawl out for hours or months. Great. ID it. Number two, decide that you're really fucking over that identified aftermath. Once you figure out that you have a habit that leads to loss, especially of precious time and energy, and gather observations from a few occurrences to really track and seal in the long and short term after effects, then I think it helps to get pissed and use that rage to decide no more. I'm not going to let my pain become an anger that I have fake conversations about for 5 days to the detriment of my entire life. I'm mad now about being distractedly mad then, enough to the point that this matters much more. I'm sick of wasting my time, my energy, my life. Awesome. Now, here's a little tip to help with that without really getting mad at you. 2.5, tie that unconscious pattern that's wrecking your shit to whoever taught it to you. This habit isn't authentically yours. Don't be upset at yourself. Be upset at the gifter of the habit. Better yet, more humanly so, tie the unconscious pattern that's wrecking your shit to the unconscious pattern that's wrecked this other person's shit, so then it then bubbled over and flooded into yours. The point is, reach the apex of being done with the downstream effects of the habit that you need to bound. And it helps to be done with the shared intergenerational human condition part of that habit, rather than becoming angry at yourself or at another person. Those wouldn't be love behaviors. Those would be lack of compassion and integrated thought behaviors. Remember, we must maintain the thread. And number 3, implement with attentional and behavioral switches. You sense the feeling, you hear the keyword, you notice the off-base behavior that you're trying to create an inner boundary around. You realize it's been 3 weeks since you had a different mood or mental narrative. Awesome. Noticing it is a considerable challenge. Now do something else. Shift attention to a different thought. Try to have or process the feeling in a different way. Insert a replacement behavior to halt whatever embarrassing or regretful move you were maybe about to make. If all of that is too hard, It can be too hard in the moment when some degree of wise is lost. Create shortcuts ahead of time. Now, things that help you change course or redirect your attention, such as moving to a new location to break thought, emotional, and behavioral patterns, talking to a friend who has a steady vibe that you can try to match, not one who will sense your energy and meet you in hell. Exercising or cleaning to release excess energy. Go to a class or watch one online so you aren't trying to guide yourself, which again allows for your mind to wander. Showering or even having a full restart if you can. Maybe taking a nap, getting up, getting re-ready, and reapproaching the hours you have left in the day. Engaging in whatever hobby allows for a flow state or demands your full brain cells. Sometimes a scary movie or something nervous system arousing, like, I don't know, mountain biking, does the trick by overriding your human brain because you must focus. Maybe you're reset or replenished or reflective if you get out of the house. Maybe you have a special room in your place that helps. Maybe it's the backyard, balcony, your car, where you have the most self and cognitive control. Maybe you need a certain element, touching rocks, looking at a gigantic and vacuous sky, staring into a campfire, wading in or being proximal to a babbling creek. Experiment. What helps you to ditch one internal direction that you were headed in and shift your attention to a new one. It'll be an individual solution for individual brains. You will need to learn what works for you with trials. And you'll also want to seal in the positive consequences that affect you in a way that's individually meaningful so that this behavior is reinforced and you're more likely to do it again later. How can you save yourself so much easily, almost instinctively wasted time, energy, and pain? By creating boundaries within yourself, what you will and won't engage with, and for how long. And then, how can you honor your own inner boundaries by noticing when you're touching a hot stove and cognitively shifting your energy to actually remove your hand from that burner instead of being tortured by it in the moment and dealing with the skin grafts much later. It will require your participation to determine the answers. But first, hey, another quick example right there. A boundary. I don't hold my palm on surfaces that can melt my flesh. A rule. Don't burn my hand, stove, or else I will stand here in excruciating pain until the ambulance arrives, and then you will be scrapped by junkers. So I have no oven whatsoever and no means with which to cook my own food. Boom. Yeah, again, which one do you think is more effective? The wiser choice. The boundary, not the self-fucking, impulsive, control-based decision to reach for retribution after allowing oneself to be predictably injured by an entity that questionably cares or has the capacity to behave differently. Rules. And with that, I've said way more than I planned to. All right, boundaries. We need them, or else we can't relate to anyone in a positive and sustainable way, not even ourselves. We need them both with others because we are individually wrapped bite-sized delights, and within ourselves because life is doable and experience is sensible when we can separate our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and manage them, instead of existing as one continuous, unconscious, uncontrolled string of them, ganging up and beating our real intentions into the pavement. If we can't bound our inner activities, we almost certainly cannot abide by our own boundaries, which are guidelines for our behaviors, instructions for us, and how we will respond in various circumstances. When I sense, hear, think, do X, I personally need to Y. Unlike rules, don't A or else I'll B, acting like an asshole, which are harsh distinctions for others. Attempts to control them, which actually disempower the beholder because you can state it and you can scream about it all that you want, but your inefficacy and lack of received respect is on brilliant display when no one falls into line. Alternatively, your power is clear when you prove yourself a man of your word, when you do the thing that you stated was your boundary, which again is about creating room for you to be able to care for yourself, not waiting for someone else to fix you. An act that will both boost your self love, respect, and care, and is indicative of having any to begin with in order to take action. All of this harkens back to the fact that here on material Earth, in individually birthed bodies, we must be able to see ourselves and each other realistically as distinct but interconnected and highly similar beings. If we can't see them as them, then we can't send them love. If we can't see us as us, same thing. And with all of the big feelings and fucked up core beliefs we've probably accrued about ourselves and other humans through the layers of relational trauma, let's say it behooves us to draw those lines so that we're accurately loving us for us and them for the individuals that we all actually are, and avoiding the creation of additional toxic, abuse-born, logical but inaccurate obstacles to real self-love. I think we're going to see that as time heats up, boundaries and the capacity for compassion, for love, are more related and on display than ever. We can all be a big bag of chocolate chips left in the sun, melted together into one indiscernible and undigestible shit mound as emotions go wild and individual identities are lost in the pudding. Or we can all be a bag of M&Ms, still feeling the heat when it cranks up, maybe melting a little inside, becoming soft, disordered, and also having the room, the shell, to sustain and celebrate the glorious colors of our individual candy coatings, which contain our messes and allow us to firm up again before returning to other exposure. Roughly, we are all the same, made from the same ingredients, also bounded by the reality of what makes us distinct. Sweet, beautiful boundaries around and within each one of those delicious little selves. And that's some kind of love, I think. I'm honestly still practicing. Hail yourself. Hail Archie. Thanks again for being here. Talk to you soon, fucker. Bye.